Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Cioffi. It's a Tuesday night. We're going to get things going, and I'm going to do something a little bit different tonight because we're going to actually start with Tropical Storm Ophelia, which is sitting way out in the eastern Atlantic, and it's not going to have an impact on the weather in the United States, but it is actually going to have some kind of impact perhaps on the weather across Western Europe. We're going to take a look at what the GFS does with this. Hopefully I'll be able to pull up the sector. But we are going to see the model, and the European does the same thing, where it tracks it just east of northwestern Spain, and then just offshore right over the British Isles as we move through the next 5 to 7 days. It'll be very interesting. It is forecast to become a hurricane. We don't often see storms take tracks like this, but it's starting out so far to the east. It's east of 40 degrees west and sitting along about 30 degrees north, so it's already pretty far up there. And with what's going on out in the Atlantic, we are going to see it perhaps bring some nasty weather to the British Isles in the coming days. But why don't we go right to the GFS on this, and we'll bring it up for you. Very interesting. Back in 2005 we had Tropical Storm Vincent that formed late in the season and wound up going into Spain, which many of the weather experts at the time were racking their brains out trying to remember the last time such a thing happened, and apparently it was one of the first times. All right, you're going to have to just bear with me here because I got to change the size of this. I didn't realize I would have to do that, so let's see if I can change the size. And properties. And hopefully this will work, because I want to show you the GFS on this. Otherwise it'll be a shame if I can't. And I think I might be able to. Okay, yes I can. Alright, very good. So here you go. This is Europe on the GFS. Now Ophelia is not quite on the scene here yet, but it will be in short order. Let me make sure I'm starting from the beginning, and we'll move it along. So you can see here you've got Spain, France, and the British Isles, and Ophelia should make an appearance there soon. There it is. Okay, and we are at Sunday here at this point. Now watch what it does. It actually, I'm not sure if this is completely tropical, but I imagine it's going to have some tropical characteristics here, looking at how the isobars are structured on the GFS model. But it takes it just to the northwest of the northwest coast of Spain, and then passes not too far offshore from France, where the geography sticks out there, and I guess that's where the channel is. I'm sorry, the tunnel, the English or the channel, and there's the English Channel, and it takes it right into Great Britain as a rather strong storm here, probably a Category 1 hurricane, or if at this point it's become extratropical, it's certainly a strong extratropical storm, and this would be for Monday into Tuesday of next week. And then you still can find an identifiable low that heads up toward the Arctic regions. So very, very unusual that we see something like this going on. Very interesting in our weather world that we live in to see things like this happen. Now, I want to go to the western part of the United States because there's a big problem out in the west with the wildfires that we've been seeing. And unfortunately, when we look at the GFS model today with regards to activity in the west, in Northern California with the wildfires, it remains dry. I think the first real chance of any important rain may not come until sometime later next week as a strong storm comes into the Pacific Northwest. You can see it here. This is along about next Wednesday and Thursday that we see something coming in and bringing some substantial rains and snows to the mountains there. So that may be the first shot. They have probably another 7 days to wait for this. And notice as we move through the end of next week, we start to see some snows across much of interior Oregon, Washington, on up through Idaho and Montana. So it just kind of sets up the fact that the trough is still in the western part of the United States. We'll put the North America view, and I'll show you the jet stream pattern here. And indeed, the trough is in the west, and we still have a ridge in the east. But let's go back to the beginning and see how we get there, because that really is the most important, that we see what the path through all of this is. Now, right now, we have a little troughing off the west coast. There's a disturbance coming out of the middle Mississippi Valley that's going to actually bring some cool, raw conditions into the northeast and the northern mid-Atlantic states beginning later Wednesday and lasting into early Friday. That system just kind of lifts up, and it's the onshore flow that sets up with high pressure building up in southeastern Canada and northern New England, bringing in the ocean flow. There's a trough that comes into the west going into this weekend here, and then you go on into next week, and it's right around the middle part of next week that you start to get this really strong system that moves across the Gulf of Alaska and into the Pacific Northwest. So that would be the problem solver with regards to the weather in the western part of the U.S. So very interesting overall. And I'm going to go back one run of the model to take a look, at least with respect to the overall long-range pattern. And here's the, is it going to let me change? Please be kind to me. There we go. And this is from the prior run, so it's actually even deeper on this one run. Notice later next week, ridge in the east, trough in the west. It's not a strong ridge in the east, but there's ridging in the east, which means that the weather would be mostly dry. Then the ridge gets strong as that trough in the west starts to translate eastward. And once again, the GFS late in the period wants to bring a trough into the eastern part of the United States, but it's been doing this now for well over a week, where every run, the last 3 or 4 time frames, the last 2 or maybe the last 2 or 3 days, it wants to bring a trough into the eastern part of the United States, and I have to tell you, I'm very skeptical of that at the moment. Now, as far as the weather is concerned going forward currently, we'll just bring up the northeastern satellite view. And let me just cover my face there so you can just see what's happening, at least satellite-wise. You've got a fairly good upper air disturbance here that's swinging out of the middle Mississippi Valley. You can see the twist in the clouds, and that's moving up to the northeast. Dry air covering the northeast today. We got rid of the humidity. It was very warm. Temperatures went above 80, but that's going to change as that high builds down. And then as we get that onshore flow established tomorrow, temperatures will probably make it into the 70s and fall back into the 60s. And then stay in the 60s pretty much Thursday and Friday. Warm up again this coming weekend before another weather front moves through early next week. So for the most part, the weather across the U.S. is fairly uneventful at this point. You can see, by the way, there's turning here going on east of the Bahamas. That's an upper air low that is rotating back westward. There may be some kind of a surface low that may try and develop out of this, but I don't think it's going to be something that we'll have to worry too much about becoming any kind of tropical depression or a tropical storm. It just doesn't seem like that is in the cards. So you can see the overall pattern is fairly benign here. Again, the most interesting thing that I think we're going to have to look at may be Ophelia if it winds up going up into Great Britain. Okay, so let's give everybody a big collective hello. I see Dio here, Zachary, Leon, James NASCAR, Scott Olson, Weather and LO 78, Daniel Green, Go 7, Hosea, Raymond is here, Zachary is here. Zachary, I think Ophelia might be, it might be one of these rare tropical storms or even a minimal hurricane that winds up going up just offshore Western Europe. I tend to think it probably will make some sort of extratropical transition, but it may still be a fairly fierce cyclone as it moves northward. We'll have to see. The European does pretty much the same thing. It was indicating this yesterday, and the GFS has kind of come around to it as well. Leon wants a significant pattern shift. Yeah, and I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. We may have to wait until we get into November for that. Doesn't look to me like there's anything in the upper air that wants to break down that ridge in the east, trough in the west scenario. Funny how we managed to avoid it for the months of April, for the most part, for the months of April, May, June, July, and August, and then suddenly in the middle part of September, it just magically appeared, and now it's hanging tough. But 6 to 8 weeks for a pattern like that sometimes when they hang on that long. And for you winter weather lovers, better to have it now. If that's the way it works in the atmosphere, I don't believe it does, but you might as well have it now, so maybe there's a better chance you won't have it down the road. Let's see. Will the United States get hit by another major hurricane? You know what? We're running out of time, weather and LO. There's nothing. The only spot where I see, a chance for development in the next week or so, we are, is in the Caribbean, where pressures are going to remain low. Now, whether something comes out of that remains to be seen. PlayStation Boss wants me to address the 384-hour on the GFS, and I'm sure, and I know what he's referring to. He's referring to the fact that the day-run GFS, which I'll bring it up for you so you can take a look. Whoops. We're going to bring the day-run GFS out to 384 hours, which is squirrely, okay? So just the fact that it did it on the last run most likely means that it's not going to do it anything resembling that on this particular run. Okay, and what he is referring to is this, okay? As the model, and I'll back it up, it's because of the fact that it shows a big change in the trough position, in the trough going into the east, that it develops a big storm in the western Great Lakes and brings down a shot of real Canadian cold air into the United States. I will say this again, as I said earlier, the GFS model has been doing this for many days now, that it keeps showing something like this happening at the end of its forecast cycle. And every run, it's 12 hours later, 12 hours later, 12 hours later. So I really would not put any stock in this at all until I see a definite change in the upper air scheme of things, where the trough goes, the ridge in the east completely breaks down, or even at the very least partially breaks down. We'll take a partial breakdown as satisfactory. But until I see something like that happening, I'm not going to put any stock into a model that's indicating suddenly opening up the spigots and showing cool Canadian air moving down into the eastern half of the United States. Let's see. GFS, Billy Johnson showing a lot of wind shear in the Caribbean. Yeah, you start to get deeper into October, that's going to also become a problem. You do have increasing upper air winds extending further and further south. So, you start to get to the probability of tropical systems developing begin to diminish once we move through the middle part of the month. I still think we might have one or two more, but it would not be a huge shock to me if it just kind of shut down from here, but we'll see. Bach 505, waiting to see above normal pressure in Canada as a precursor for cool weather in the Northeast. GFS shows it later in the period, but probably wishful thinking. Yeah, I agree. It is, I think, wishful thinking at this point. It's been, as I said, or I just said, it's been doing it over and over again for the last 5 or 6 days, and it keeps pushing it back 12 hours on every run. So I'm not going to buy it until I start to see it inside the 7 to 10 day period. I'm really not going to pay much attention to it. Block in Greenland at 384. You want to see the ensembles. Okay, really fast, because then I'm running out of time, because I got a show to do at 7 o'clock. So hang on a second, folks. Let's see if I can bring up the ensembles. Delvin wants the ensembles, so Joe will give Delvin the ensembles. And interact, ensemble, GEFs. So here's the upper air ensembles. In fact, you know what? Let me just get the wider view here. And now, for those of you who don't know, the ensembles, you know, the GFS has about, I don't know, 20 some odd variations of it. Maybe it might even be more than that. And each, you know, they kind of run them all together, and every one of them has a slightly different outcome, and you try to look to see where everything is clustered. And of course, as you go out further and further into time, you're going to have more and more variations in terms of possible results. And when we look at the upper air, you know, you do have the ensembles still, deep trough in the west, some ridging in the east again, so that kind of matches up with what the operational did. And then as we go late in the period, you start to see that troughing show up in the Great Lakes down into the central Gulf states. So and a ridge popping up in the west. Is this real? I don't know. It's 16 days out into the future. I think the probability of this being correct is going to be low. But, you know, we always have an open mind on these things, and you know, maybe the GFS is onto something, but I tend to think we're going to have to wait until we get into the very late part of this month or the beginning of November before we see any kind of real pattern change taking place. All right, folks, got to end it here. I got some TV work to do in just a little bit. So thanks everybody for being here. We'll talk more about Ophelia and its possible impact on Western Europe over the next several days. And of course, we'll be watching our weather across the United States, see what happens if that rain ever gets to California sometime later next week. That's a long ways away. In the meantime, at least we've got some cooler weather here in the east, and we've gotten rid of some of those 80-degree temperatures. So I hope you had a great Tuesday. I hope you have an even better Wednesday, and we will see you guys tomorrow.